Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today I'll be explaining to you how we can utilize Azure Service Bus in our application. So what are we gonna be covering today? We're gonna start by getting the main ingredients, and then we're gonna be going through what are we gonna build. Then we're gonna explain Service Bus basics, and then we're gonna see the structure of our application, and then we're gonna start directly coding. First, we're gonna need three things. We're gonna need a Azure account. You can get an Azure account for free. We're gonna need a .NET SDK, and then we're gonna need Visual Studio Code. Links will be available in the description down below. Just note that the service we're gonna be using today, you can utilize the 5 cents. It's gonna cost 5 cents, and you can utilize it from the free to $100 that they give you. We're gonna make sure that we delete all of those services afterwards. So what are we gonna building today? We're gonna build a sample application which gonna contain a form to collect data from the user, and once the user fills that data, it's gonna be sending an email directly to them confirming that we have received the information. We will be covering Azure Service Bus fundamentals in order to accomplish this functionality. So we can see we have an application here, and then from within this application it's gonna send some kind of information to the Azure Service Bus, and Azure Service Bus is gonna send it to the console app, which is gonna be responsible for sending the email. I have made more in-depth video covering Azure Service Bus, which you can find it in the description down below or on the upper right hand side corner of your screen right now. So, in essence, Azure Service Bus is a way to send a message from point A to point B. It means that I'm going to put the information somewhere and someone will be responsible to pick it up and processing it. Azure Service Bus leverages the idea of async process in the message queue. It means that it's very durable and it's very hard for us to lose the message. So as we can see here, we have some kind of a computer which is trying to send a message somewhere. And within the queue here, we can see that there's multiple messages, and those messages are being picked up by some kind of a service at the end. In our case, this is the form that we're gonna have here. The queue is gonna be responsible of holding the information of the emails that we wanna send, and the service here is gonna be basically our email service that's gonna be able to send the email back to the users. So what is a message and what is a queue? So a message is a JSON object which contains all of the information. So every message here, it's a JSON object contain different information. And what is a queue? A queue is a list of data items. Basically, it's a list of messages stored and is retrievable in a definite order. So basically, every single one of these is a JSON object which is called messages, and they are stored in a way that are able to retrieve based on the order of insertion. So it's first in, first out approach. So let's say this is number 3, 4, 5, 6, for example. So 6 is gonna go first, or we can do it actually, it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is gonna go in first, then 3, then 2, then 1. So basically, based on the order of insertion, the messages will be processed. So how will everything work? So let's break down the application. When the form is submitted from our web application here, a message will be created, and this message, as we have discussed previously, is going to be a JSON object. This message is going to go directly into our service bus. It's going to stay there until our email service is going to pick it up. Once that email service pick it up, it's going to be able to deserialize this message and then get the information from it, and then it's going to send the email to the user. So we're going to be building today 2 applications and 1 class library. The first application that we're going to be building is the web form application or MVC application here, which is going to contain the form, and the second application is going to be our console application, which is going to be responsible for sending the email, and we're going to use a class library in order for us to share some information between these 2 applications. So let's start coding. Let's open first our terminal, and let's make sure that we have our .NET SDK installed. So let's first clear, and then we can .NET -- version, And we can see we are running on the latest version of .NET 5, which is 5.0.103. If you see any other number, which is fine. If you see an error message, you need to re-download your .NET SDK and reinstall it. So let's start first by creating our MVC application. For that, we're going to be utilizing the .NET new keyword. So we're going to be .NET new MVC -n. It's basically the name of our application. We're going to call it sample web sender. And let's click on enter. This is going to take a few seconds to be created. And perfect. Now let's see if the application has been created. Yes, it has. Second, we're going to create our class library. We're going to put .NET new class lib, and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it sample shared. It's also going to take a few seconds. Perfect. And the last one is going to be our console application, which is going to be responsible of sending the emails. So it's going to be .NET new console -n, and we're going to call it sample app receiver. It's going to be receiving the messages from the queue. Perfect. And it's going to take also a few seconds to be created. Great. So let's open Visual Studio Code. And if we click on it, we're able to see that we have the 3 folders, which is basically our web application, our shared console library, and the console app, which is going to be responsible to receiving the messages from the queue. Perfect. So first of all, let's open our terminal. We go to View, Terminal, and let's add references to the shared library between sample and the app receiver. So how do we do that? It's very simple. We'll just utilize the .NET reference, .NET add sample web sender. We utilize the CS proj and we type reference. And what do we add reference to? It's gonna be the sample shared and sample shared. Perfect. Now let's add to the second one, which is the app receiver. So .NET add sample app receiver reference to sample shared. And we can verify this by opening first our sample web sender, and we can go to the CS proj, and we can see we have a reference to our shared class library. Similarly, if we go to the sample app receiver and we open the sample app receiver CS proj, and we can see that we have also a sample shared a reference to the sample shared library. Perfect. So the next step is we need to install a new Git packages to our web form so we can utilize Service Bus as well to our console library. So how do we do that? First, within our terminal, let's navigate to our sample web sender, and from there we're going to utilize the .NET add package. So it's going to be .NET add package. The new Git package will be Microsoft Azure Service Bus. This is gonna take a few seconds. I think I misspelled .NET add package. I misspelled Microsoft. Apologize. Now let's try it again. Perfect. Now let's do the same thing for the sample app receiver. So let's navigate to it, and we'll install the same thing, .NET package add package Microsoft Azure Service Bus. Perfect. And we can see it has already been populated in our CS proj here, and if we open the other one, we can see it's also being referenced to it. Perfect. So the next step for us is going to be creating a model class, and we're going to be adding it into our shared class library so both of the application can utilize it. So let's open our shared class library. Let's delete the class 1 because we don't really need it. Yes, move to trash. Let's add a new folder. We'll call it models. and within it let's add a class, and this class will call it person. Basically this person model is gonna contain a string. It's gonna be first name, another property string is gonna be last name, and the last one is gonna be email. String is gonna be email. Perfect. So once we add those, now we need to go to our sample web sender, and within our app setting.json we're gonna add a new section for connection string, so we can add our Azure Service Bus connection string. So it's gonna be connection strings. Make sure that you have a comma before you add the new connection strings, and then we're gonna call this Azure Service Bus connection, and we'll leave it empty for now until we create it on our Azure portal. Perfect. Then now we need to create our services, and those services basically are gonna be responsible to manage the connection and the functionality between our MVC application and our service bus. So within our sample web sender, let's create a new folder. We'll call this folder services, and we'll create a new interface, and this new interface we're gonna call it Azure Bus Service. Perfect. And that was within this Azure Bus Service, we're gonna have only one function, which is gonna be the sending email function. So it's gonna be task send message async, and it's gonna take the person. I'm gonna call it person message, and we're gonna give it the queue name. The queue name. Let's fix the references. Great. Now we're gonna create the actual service which is gonna be inheriting from actually referring to the implementing the interface. So we're gonna call it Azure Bus Service, and this is gonna be implementing the Azure Bus Service. And basically, if we just directly implement the interface and then we add the code that we need. So first of all, we're gonna be referring to the configuration, so we can get the configuration that we have within our app settings. So for that, we're gonna use private read only configuration. I'm gonna make it config, and let's fix the references here. And second, let's create our constructor so we can initialize this. Put configuration config, and this is gonna be underscore config equal config. We're just initializing it through our constructor dependency injection. And then we're gonna start building our send message async function. So first of all, we need to make this function async. Second, we're gonna get the connection string, so var connection string equal underscore config dot get connection string, and we're just gonna get this name of the connection string that we have added. So I think it was called Azure Service Bus Connection, yes. So let's copy this, we'll put it here, and this basically get the connection string from the config, from the settings. And then we're gonna be initializing our queue. So var queue client equal new queue client, and we're gonna pass it the connection string. And as well, we need to pass the queue name. So queue name. Now let's fix the references, and let's add a command initializing the queue. And after that, basically it's gonna be as simple as serializing the person message. So convert the person object into JSON. So it's gonna be var message body equal, let's utilize a JSON serializer dot serialize, and we're gonna pass it the person message. Perfect. Let's fix this. And lastly, we need to convert this message body into byte array so we are able to send it. So for that, we're gonna be var message equal new message. So basically, if we look at the reference, new message is being referred to from it's not something here, but basically this new message is gonna be referred to from the Microsoft Azure Service Bus package that we have installed, and this will take the Unicode, basically the byte array from our message body. So how do we do that? Simply we're gonna using the encoding mechanism .utf8 .get bytes. So we're converting the string to bytes to a byte array, and we're just gonna pass the message body. Very simple. And here we're just gonna add a reference, and lastly we're just gonna await. We're gonna use the queue client that we have created to send async. We're sending this message, and that's it. So just a quick summary of what we did here. First, we have created an interface which is have only one message, only one method. And the reason we did that, because we need to initialize it within our dependency injection so we can refer to it within our controller. So this is why we have created the interface here, and then we have created the class that's going to be implementing that interface. We refer to the I configuration so we can read the configuration from our app settings, and then we just implemented that function. First, we have read the connection string from the app settings, we initialized the queue, and then we have converted the body into serialized the body into a string, and then here we initialized the queue message, and then we sent it. Perfect. So what's the next step? The next step is for us to register the iBus service interface and the Azure Bus service into our startup class, so we can utilize it within our dependency injection. So let's go to our startup class, and inside our configure services, after add controller with views, let's add services dot add transient, and it's gonna use the Azure Bus service and Azure Bus service, and that's it. So basically here, let's add a comment. This will register the service in our DI container, or let's say dependency injection container. So let's fix the references here, and that should be it. Just let us build the application. Let's navigate back to our sample web, and let's just type .NET build to make sure that everything is still building. Perfect. So the next step for us, it's gonna be going to our Azure portal and creating a new Azure Bus Service Bus on our Azure portal. So let's navigate to our web browser, and we're gonna go to create resources, and within our create resources we're gonna type service bus. Perfect. And then we're gonna click on create. So as we can see here, we need to select our subscription. For me, it's gonna be pay as you go. Then we're gonna utilize the resources. I'm gonna create a new resource. I'm gonna call it Azure Service Bus Test, and let's give it a name. We'll call it Sample Web Service Bus, and the location gonna be choosing UK South, and the pricing tier, all we're gonna need is the basic. So we have 3 different types. We have basic, standard, and premium. Since we're gonna be using the bare minimum of our of service bus implementations, which is gonna be a queue, and we're gonna basically sending only to one service, it's not really needed to have a premium or a standard. Basic will be more than enough. Let's take a look at the pricing so we can have a better understanding of what other functionality we get from the premium and the standard. So basically we can see the basic will cost us 5 cents, which is amazing compared to the services that we have. So it allows us to send almost 1 million message to our queue within 1 month, which is great. And we can see that it has the maximum capacity of 256k, which is great. If we go to the standard, which is gonna be around $10 a month, it gives us the ability to have topics. I have covered topics in my other video, which is delve more in depth into the Azure Service Bus. I will link it in the description down below and on the upper right hand section right now. But we don't really need that at the moment. And for premium, it's basically for large enterprises, and we don't really need that. So let's stick with the basics for now. And let's go next. We don't really need anything from tags, and let's go to review, and we can see that the verification has been succeeded, and let's click on create. So this will take roughly around a few seconds, I think maybe a minute max, and just make sure that once you do that, once we finish with this, you delete it so no charges will be recurring to you. And we can see that Azure has already started to creating the resources and creating everything that we need. Let's wait for another few seconds, and we can see that deployment is under process. It shouldn't take more than an extra 15 seconds based on my previous experience with it. I'm not sure why it's taking so long. Perfect. So now the deployment has been completed. Let's go to our resources, and we can see that we have an Azure Service Bus. Perfect. So after we have, right now, what are we gonna do? We're gonna be adding a queue, because right now we created a blank service bus which doesn't contain any queue on it. So right now we're gonna be adding a queue on top of that service bus. In order for us to do that, we can just click on the plus here, or we can go to entities queue. So let's click on this, and let's click on the plus sign. So what are we gonna be calling our queue? We're gonna call it person queue. Just simple and easy. Let's leave all of the defaults here. Max queue size 1 GB, perfect. Max delivery count 10. I'll leave everything, and we don't really need to enable that lettering right now, and we're not gonna enable partitions. If you want to know more information about it, please check my other videos. So let's click on create. Perfect. Just should take around, I think, 30 seconds. Perfect. It was more faster than I have anticipated. Now let's click on it, and we can see that our queue right now is ready for us to use. Great. So what is the next step? The next step is we need to get the connection string for this queue. How do we do that? On the left hand side, we need to go to shared access policies, and then let's see, I think it should be here, but it's not loading. Node policies. Okay, let's try to go back to the home page and then refresh and then go back in. Sometimes Azure gets stuck. So sample web service that we have created. Let's go to the queue. Let's select the queue we just created. And let's go to the shared access policies. That's fine. Let's create a new one. And this new one, we'll call it main access. And we're gonna select everything for now. This is again just for sample. If you want to create your own for a production environment, make sure that you give it the right permission that you need. And since it's only a sample, we're just gonna give it the full admin permission. And let's click on create. And then let's click on this. And what we are gonna do is we're gonna copy the primary connection string. So now it's copied. Let's go back to our Visual Studio Code and let's go to our app settings.json and let's paste it in. Perfect. So now that we have pasted it in, let's save it. And our next step is let's now create a the functionality from within our controller so we can test it out and we can see what's going. We can see the queue is in Azure. So let's go to our controller folder. We're just gonna modify the home controller because this is a sample application, and we're gonna be modifying the index. So this is the index, which is gonna be the HTTP GET. First of all, let's add some reference to our Azure Bus service that we have created. So it's gonna be private, read only, Azure Bus service, and it's gonna call it bus service. And let's fix the reference. And let's add the constructor injection, which is gonna be Azure Bus service, and we'll call it bus service, and underscore bus service equal bus service. Perfect. After we have added the references of what we need, now let's create the post for index. HTTP post, and then we're gonna be public because it's gonna be connecting to the Azure Service Bus, so it's gonna be async. We're just gonna return a task of action result, and we're gonna be naming it index, and it's gonna take a person. Okay, let's fix the references here. Great. So what are we gonna do? It's gonna be very, very simple. It's just gonna be calling the the bus service, and we're gonna call the send message, and basically we're just gonna be sending the person that we have got from the form, and we're gonna give the queue name. And what did we call the queue? Let's check. I forgot. So we called the queue person queue. Okay, I'm gonna call it person queue, and that's it. And let's return redirect to another page. For us, let's redirect to privacy if everything goes smoothly. So it's gonna be return redirect to action, and we're gonna redirect to the privacy page. Okay, great. Now let's build our front end. So let's build our view. So let's go to the views folder. We'll go click on home, and then we click on index, and let's delete this. We don't really need it. And let's create the form now. So first let's create a div class. We'll give it a row, and then let's create another div class. We'll give it call -md-12. We're just utilizing basic bootstrap classes. And now let's start with the form. So form ASP.action is going to be the index action that we have created right now. The ASP controller is going to be the home controller, and the method is going to be post. Very simple. And here we're just going to be creating 3 fields. First, it's going to be form group. So it's going to be div class form-group, and we're going to have a label which is going to be the first name, and then we're going to have an input of type text, or we can just make ASP-for equal first name. Oh, sorry, we forgot to add the model for this, so as well let's add it directly. It's gonna be at model, and as we can see, this one is under a different library, so it's gonna be sample share.models.person. Perfect. And then we're just gonna give it the type, which is gonna be text, and let's give it a class of form-control, and that's it. Control without the E, and that's it. Let's close it, and we're gonna be repeating this for the other 2. So let's copy this and paste it 2 times. It will be faster. So the first name is gonna be last name, and here we're gonna change it to last name, and here instead of first name it's gonna be email, and let's change it here to email. And lastly, we're gonna add a submit button. So we're gonna add a button, we're gonna make it type submit, and we're gonna give it a class of btn-primary, and we're gonna call it send message, well, submit generic. Okay, perfect. Now let's build to make sure everything is still building. Perfect. Now let's run it. .NET run. It says here that it's running on port 5000 for HTTP and 5001 for HTTPS. So let's copy this, and let's go to our web browser. Let's open a new tab and let's paste it. Perfect. Now we can see we have first name, last name, and email with a submit button. So let me put my first name, Mohamad, and email is gonna be mohamad@test.com, and let's submit this. Okay, it says we're having a problem with the namespace. Connection string should not contain an empty path. Okay, maybe we haven't saved it, so let's see it's already here. So connection string Azure Service Bus connection. Let's go to our service. Let's put a breaking point here, and let's see here if we can see more details. Namespace connection string should not contain empty path. Okay, so after a bit of investigation, the issue was that I have copied the wrong connection string. So in order for us to fix it, we need to go back to our Azure portal, and then you click on the resources, which is sample Azure that we have created, and then we need to go to the shared access policy on the root one, not inside the quiz, in the root service bus, and from there we need to click on root manage shared access key, and then we need to copy it. So once we do that, we can copy directly the connection string from here, and let's paste it within our connection string. Let's save it and let's try it again. So .NET run, and let's refresh, and let's try again. So put first name Mohamad, last name Lawand, and email is gonna be mohamad@test1.com, and let's submit, and we can see that it automatically redirected to the privacy policy as we did before, as we added in our code. And let's check if we have anything within our queue. So let's go to the queue, and let's click on person queue. There's two messages because there was one I sent before, but we can see that there's a message in the queue waiting to be used. So now we know that our code is actually working. The next step, it's gonna be creating the console application, which is gonna be receiving that message and processing it. So let's jump back to Visual Studio Code and let's stop the application. Let's go to our sample app receiver, and from there let's click on the program.cs, and first we're gonna be defining the connection string, then the queue name, and then we're gonna be initializing the queue client, and then we're gonna be building our functionality. So first let's define our connection string. So it's gonna be const string connection string. This is not the perfect way of doing it. Actually, this is a bad way of embedding connection string within our code, but for the sake of this sample application, we're gonna put it here. Usually, you can either put it in your app settings and read it from there, or what you can do, if you're gonna be able to publish to Azure, you can use the Azure Key Vault and embed it there. So for now, we're just gonna put it directly into our code. Let's copy this connection string from here, and let's paste it. Perfect. The next step is we're gonna be defining the name of our we're gonna be defining the client. So static IQ client, we're gonna call it Q client, and let's fix the references. Perfect. So the next step is basically we're going to be initializing this queue client. So it's going to be queue client equal new queue client, and we're going to pass it the connection string, and we're going to give it the queue name, which is going to be person. Let's make sure it's the, so let's go back to our home controller. Yeah, person queue. Perfect. Let's delete this, we don't really need this. And now let's create the message handling option. So what is the message handler options? Basically, it's gonna be able to see how many times we are able to process the call, and if there's gonna be any autocomplete for it. Let us fill it in and then we'll explain it one by one. So var message option equal new message handler options, and we're gonna be adding a reference to the exception received handler. So exception received handler, and we're gonna create this, but first let's define the option. So it's gonna be the maximum concurrent call. So basically it means that how many times the service can read from the queue. We're gonna say only one, so we are only able to process one at a time. So let's add a comment here and explaining what this is. So how many messages we can process at a time, which is going to be one. And the second, the autocomplete. So do we need to wait until a message is fully processed before we process another one, or do we want to, as soon as one is start to be processed, we pull another one so we can process? Let's say autocomplete equal false for now. Autocomplete equal false, and then let's add a comment here. We'll say need to wait until a message is fully processed. Perfect. So next we're gonna just be registering those within our queue client, and then we're gonna be creating the exception received handler. So queue client that we created. Okay, let's close this, and queue client queue, okay, dot register messaging handler, so process message async. This is the message, this is the function or the method that's gonna be responsible to handling the messages that's being read from the queue, and the message handler option that we have created previously. The message options, message, if I can type, okay, perfect. Let's define these two methods right now before we do anything else. So the first thing is we're gonna be defining the process message async. So it's gonna be private static async. It's gonna return a task, and it's gonna be process message async. It's gonna take the message, call it message, and it's gonna take the cancellation token. We're gonna give it token. Okay, perfect. Now from within this method by itself, let's do the deserialization of the message. First, let's fix those references. So tasks and the cancellation token. Perfect. So first is we're gonna be deserialize the message body. So to do that, we're gonna go to var JSON body equal encoding. We're gonna basically use the encoding as we did for the serialization. So we're gonna basically convert it from a byte array to string. So UTF-8 dot get string, and we're gonna use message dot body. Oh, it's called message here. Let's call it message dot body. Excuse me. Okay, great. Let's fix the encoding, the reference. Next, now we have got the message body. Now let's deserialize it. So it's going to be converted to a person. So var person object equal JSON serializer dot deserialize and we're gonna convert it into a person object, and we're gonna give it the JSON body. Let's fix those references, and let's fix this one. Perfect. So the next step basically is we're gonna be, in theory, we need to send the email. I'm not gonna be implementing the email sending functionality right now. If you're interested in to see how we can send emails from console application, please comment in the comments down below and I'll add that functionality. But for now, we're just gonna be displaying the first name, last name, and email of that user. So in order for us to do that, we're gonna just create a console.writeLine. Basically, we're gonna use string interpolation. So this is gonna be first name. We're gonna put person object dot first name, and then let's copy this, and this is gonna be last name, and this is gonna be email. And here we just change it to email, and here we change it to last name. Okay, perfect. So after this, basically we're just gonna that since our options have specified that autocomplete is false, we need to tell the queue that this processing has been completed here. So for us to do that, we're gonna be sending back the log tokens, so to inform that the message processing has been completed. So how do we do that? We're just gonna put await. We're gonna call the queue client and the complete async, and then from here we're gonna use the message, basically this message that we have received. We're gonna use the system properties, and then we're gonna give it the log token, because basically once a message go from a queue to the service, it has a lock on it, so because it's being processed. And how do we tell the queue that it has been finished processing? We send that lock token back telling it, okay, this message that has this lock-in has been completed successfully. So let's add here a message telling it inform, actually updating the queue that the message has been updated, processed successfully. Okay, perfect. Lastly, we need to add the last method, which is private static. I think it was called the exception received handler. So we'll put the exception received handler, and this is gonna take the arguments, which is gonna be the exception received event args. I'm gonna call it args, and basically if there's any exception, we're just gonna be logging it out. Usually, again, in like a production scenario, you need to utilize, for example, a logging mechanism like Kibana, or you can use application insights, so you're able to log these error out. So for now, we're just gonna use string interpolation. We're gonna put something went wrong, and we're just gonna share the message, which is gonna be args.exception. That's it. And since this is expecting a task, sorry, we didn't put it here. Since this is expecting a task, what we can do is we can just return task.completed a task. Perfect. Great. So the last thing we're gonna need to add here before we close the queue client before receiving is, because within our console application, it's gonna go one by one directly, and it's not gonna wait. It's not gonna be open. So what we want to do here is we want actually to tell the program when it's gonna close, and the simplest way for us to do that is just by pressing a key or like hitting enter on the keyboard, so we can tell the console application to close and stop processing requests. In order for us to do that, as simply as we just type console.read key read line, and this way, as soon as we click enter on our keyboard, the application will stop and the console will stop reading from the queue. And then since application has stopped reading, let's close the connection to it. So it's gonna be queue client dot close async. Perfect. And since this is an await, we need to make it here async, and we need to make this a task. Okay, great. So now we have our console application ready, which is gonna be reading from the queue. Let's try to run it and see if it will actually receive those two options, those two messages that are in the queue right now. So let's navigate to sample app receiver, and we'll just first build it, .NET build. Perfect. And now let's run it, .NET run. And we can see that it got the first name, last name, and the email, first name, last name, and the email. Perfect. So let's open another terminal, and let's navigate to our web application and run it. And let's navigate back to our web browser, and let's go here and let's put, for example, Mickey Mouse, and their email is gonna be mouse@email.com, for example. Send to, for example, and perfect. And let's send another one, which is gonna be, let's say, Slim Shady, and it's gonna be slim@email.com, and let's click submit. Perfect. And now if we go back to our console application and we go back to the first terminal, we can see that directly Mickey Mouse has been processed, as well as Slim Shady has been processed, and their email has been sent to them correctly. Okay, great. So basically, let's do a quick summary of what we did here. We have firstly created a web application with a form, which is gonna be taking the requests from the client. So here we have created this form, and then we have created the services, which is gonna be managing the connection to our Azure Service Bus and sending the request to Azure Service Bus. After that, we have created the Azure Service Bus within Azure. Let's go back to it. I'm not sure why it's not opening. Okay, and then here we created the Azure Service Bus, and if we refresh this right now, we can see that all of these has been processed successfully, and we have made sure that the messages are reaching the Azure Service Bus queue that we have created. And then lastly, what we did is we created a console application, which is going to be responsible for reading all of these all of these messages from the Azure Service Bus, and basically processing them. So it's either going to be sending directly an email for us. We didn't implement the email functionality, but we just displayed it. Again, if you're interested to see how we can send emails from the console application, please write it down in the comments down below, and I will create that functionality for you. And lastly, thanks again for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.